Have you ever stopped to think about how we even start to study something as messy and complicated, and frankly, as fascinating as the human mind? Well, today we're going to dive into two totally different ways researchers try to tackle that exact problem.
Yeah, it really all comes down to this one big question, right? How do we actually understand what makes people tick? Is it all about numbers and charts and experiments, or is there something more to it?
For the longest time, the world of psychology had what seemed like a pretty simple answer. Look, if you want to understand people, you got to treat it like any other science. That means you measure it, you control for all the variables, and you collect that hard, solid data.
And this classic approach, well, it has a name: quantitative research. It's probably what most of us picture in our heads when we hear the word science. So when you look at it, the quantitative way of doing things is super structured. It's a very clear process. You start with a big idea, a theory you want to test. Then you narrow that down to a really specific hypothesis. From there, you set up this tightly controlled experiment, usually in a lab. And the whole point? It's to get hard numbers from a whole bunch of people so you can spot patterns and say something general about how things work. It's all about being precise, systematic, searching for that one objective truth. But then, something started to happen. Researchers began to wonder, is this numbers-first approach really getting the full picture? A kind of discontentment started bubbling up. And this all kind of came to a head in the 1970s. This was a huge turning point. You had psychologists starting to speak up, saying, hey, wait a minute, by sticking people in these sterile labs and just turning their experiences into numbers, aren't we, stripping away everything that actually matters? All the context, all the complexity that makes us, well, us. This quote from Alvin Toffler just nails the feeling at the time. The fear was that by zeroing in on these tiny, measurable details, researchers were totally losing the big picture of what it actually means to be a human being. And Mary Brown Parley really put her finger on it here. If you take all the messy, real-world stuff, social interactions, the environment, and you try to cram it into these neat little experimental boxes, are you even studying reality anymore? Or is it just some fake, simplified version? So this question just hung over the entire field. In this quest to be scientific, was psychology accidentally losing its soul? It was becoming crystal clear that a new path, or at least a different one, was needed. And that different path was qualitative research. This was a huge shift away from just measuring things and a move toward understanding meaning. So instead of asking questions like how much or how many, this new wave of researchers started asking, what is it like? The whole focus shifted to understanding people's day-to-day lives in their own words and in their own worlds. Now think back to that list for the quantitative side. See how different this is? It's almost the exact opposite. Qualitative research, it's not really about testing a theory that's already there. A lot of the time, it's about creating a new one from scratch. You go in with these big, open-ended questions. You stay flexible. And this stuff happens out in the real world, not a lab. And instead of thousands of people, you might work with just a small, focused group to get really deep, rich data. We're talking stories, interviews, just observing life as it happens. Okay, so it might be tempting to look at this and think, all right, so you just pick a different tool for a different job. But the divide here is so much deeper than just a choice of technique. Look at the difference. It's night and day. Quantitative is all about testing theories with numbers, and the researcher is supposed to stay distant, objective. Qualitative is about building theories from things like stories, and the researcher is often part of the process, looking for themes and meaning. They're not just different methods. They are two completely different ways of seeing the world. And this gets us to a really key idea here, the research paradigm. It sounds complicated, but it's not just about a technique. No, it's a whole worldview. A paradigm is basically the set of deep-down beliefs and assumptions a researcher has about what reality even is and how we can ever hope to know anything about it at all.
As William Filstead said, these are basically different frameworks for understanding what it even means to know something. They have fundamentally different answers to the question, how do we know what we know?
And Ray Rist puts it even more bluntly. Choosing between these two isn't just a technical thing. It's a philosophical choice. It's even an ideological choice. It says something about your core beliefs about how the world works.
So why does any of this matter? Well, it's because the assumptions we start with actually determine the kind of questions we can ask. And the questions we ask, well, they determine the answers we can possibly find.
Okay, so you can really break this down into 3 big questions. First, there's the ontology question. That's just a fancy way of asking, what's the nature of reality? Is there one single solid truth out there that we can measure? Or are there a bunch of different realities, all shaped by our own lived experiences? Then you've got the epistemology question. This one's about knowledge. How do we actually get knowledge? Do we get it through objective measurement? Or by interpreting what things mean to people? And last, the theoretical question. What really makes people tick? Is it all just cause and effect, like a machine? Or is it about the personal meanings and stories we create for ourselves?
So here's the bottom line. The choice between a giant spreadsheet full of data and a deep one-on-one interview, that's not just a technical decision. It is a philosophical one. It reflects what you believe is real, what you believe is knowable, and ultimately what you believe it means to be human. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty big thought to chew on. If the method we pick, if our entire worldview actually shapes the reality we end up seeing, well, then that forces us to ask a really important question, doesn't it? What realities are we missing? By choosing to look one way, what parts of this incredibly complex human experience are we leaving completely in the dark?